her life.
So this is a perfect segue now to bring in our guest,
Yes.
Dr. John Huber, a psychologist in Texas, to help us sort through this. Have you been listening to our discussion, Dr. Huber?
Yes, I have. I've been listening to the discussion. I think it's interesting, also me being a second-degree black belt myself, and the whole violence lifestyle is not typically incorporated into the lifestyle of a martial artist, from my training at least.
But you understand the point I was making. I was just wondering, anytime a football player is in trouble, granted, I mean, most contact sport professionals aren't also getting arrested, but it's always
Right.
interesting to me that there are a lot of domestic violence issues, you know, in the NFL. It's like, okay, you know, these guys are smashing heads for months at a time, and then they go home and they smash a little bit more, some of them. So anyway.
Some of them do, that's correct.
Right, okay, so what do you make of the defense in this case? And Aaron, you know, if you have questions, you know, jump in with Dr. Huber. People who have image problems and may want to be hurt?
You know, that jumps into an area, a lifestyle choice, often referred to as a paraphilia, and bondage and sadomasochism kind of falls in that. But there's always safety procedures in there. You know, safe words like, okay, don't take it any further. The whole idea is to inflict a certain amount of pain, but not actually injure somebody. So that's the line that's been crossed. Actually, you know, what was it? 18 bones he broke, and nose 4 times. That's a little bit more than my patients who come in who live that lifestyle have experienced.
Okay, so people who live this lifestyle say there are rules up front?
Yes.
I mean, I saw a little bit on Billions. No, there's a little bit
We are
on
not,
Billions.
we're not well versed in this.
In the first season. But I'm pretty ignorant about this stuff. So you set the ground rules, and you know, there's a signal. There's a signal you give if they're going too far over the boundaries, right?
Definitely. And the 911 tape, you know, even if Christine or Christy and War Machine had that, the third person involved there, they probably didn't have boundaries set up. So I really don't think it fits into my experience of what typical bondage and sadomasochism paraphilia falls under.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about what's going through the defendant's head. What do you make of some of these missives that he sent out of his jail cell saying that he's bemoaning the end of macho men, and we're living in a cream puff world where men can't assert themselves? What's going on with him?
You know, it's oftentimes that machismo, the male need to run the world, and we're all always in control. You know, that's a fallacy, but he's living it, and he's been reinforced for it. I mean, you know, he's acted in pornography movies. He's been a champion in mixed martial arts, and he's lived his life through denigrating other people, and particularly women, and then dominating people in the arena. So that's ingrained in him, plus his admitted use, if I remember all the stuff I've read on him, of steroids, which, you know, you got roid rage in there. And then with the psychotropic medications he's been on, I've had patients who are otherwise very benign and meek people. They get on psychotropics and all of a sudden they become very aggressive. So I don't think that his rants hold any water in real life, but there are people who are right there with him who believe that.
Can I ask you about the psychotropic drugs? I don't know which ones that he was on, but some of them are very controversial because they supposedly make people suicidal or homicidal. And I've covered cases where Zoloft was the defense. It wasn't a winning defense, but my client was on Zoloft. He's not responsible for the elderly lady he killed and painted red and threw over the burn. But do you find that if if there is a tendency to make someone violent, that it's one way or the other, inward to hurt yourself or outward to hurt others?
You know, I think everybody is individual. In his case, you know, I mean, he's lived a tragic life. He watched his dad die at 13. He failed at CPR. He had his younger brother watching him fail at saving his dad's life. There's been lots of violence in his life from a very young age, and that's what he knows. That's what he understands. So it may be both. He may be hurting inside, and he's throwing that anger out towards everybody else and wants to make them hurt.
It sounds like the War Machine trial is going to start very, very soon, so we do want to keep an eye on that. And Doctor, just to follow up on the point that you made, in this case the defendant did, according to some letters and accounts, actually have a suicide attempt in jail, so that would fit in with the profile that you're describing.
I believe so, and you know, he also had some tweets. When he tweeted, he tweeted that he was guilty for some of the stuff, but they're just adding on all this extra stuff. So, you know, I think it's interesting he pleads the not guilty. You know, I am a forensic psychologist, and I've worked on multiple cases. That is kind of typical. But when he's already, in his own words, said that maybe I'm not, it's all very interesting. I can't really wait till it gets started and we see what happens.
You know, of course, the big question on a lot of people's minds is whether or not culpability should attach. From what you're telling me, it sounds like in this case, the accusations that have been made in this trial have gone so far beyond what you normally see from folks who live this lifestyle that if you were testifying or perhaps you were on the jury, how would you decide?
Well, I mean, just from what I've read, of course, you know, and I've never met War Machine, but based on my experience with my patients and everything else, this is so beyond what the typical paraphilia of BDSM, the scope of sex play and rough play that they have. It's so beyond that I could not, at this point, buy into his defense.
Interesting reaction. And we're waiting to see when things are going to pick up in the courtroom. I don't see the feed coming up here yet, but I'm hearing that they are expected to start any minute here. So we do want to keep a very close eye on that.
Dr. Huber, this is Beth Karras again. I just want to ask you, I know you're not a lawyer, you're a psychologist, but say his attorney were to confer with you and ask you about, you know, whether you think he would be a good witness or might have an anger issue on the stand if really needled on cross-examination, which is the point of cross-examination, right? To try to get under someone's skin. Do you think that this guy should stay off the stand, or does he need to get on the stand to tell the story of the consent and the rough sex and all that?
Well, you know, I think there's a lot of things that's interesting. We have a lot of survivors in this situation, so we're getting different points of view. So it may be important for him to get his story across. But my thoughts are back to the attorney and what his game plan is. He may be trying to show that, you know, hey, this guy is defective and shouldn't be held culpable for all his actions. So putting him up on the stand and having him blow up may be exactly what he wants to do. I don't know, but that is a very reasonable approach, I would think.
He certainly has a very different image in the courtroom. You know, he's all like buttoned up in a button-down shirt. He's got MAC tattooed right across his neck, but that's pretty much covered up.
The victim's name.
The victim's name,
so, you know, and there's been a lot made about image in this case because War Machine spending time in jail is not working out right now. So many people have noticed that he looks thinner, he looks less muscular, he looks less tough. If I were his attorney, I might probably encourage him to eat light.
That's right, absolutely, and that's why when you're a prosecutor, you put the photos on what he looked like at the time. I've had people I prosecuted, you know, they were maybe drug addicts at the time. You know, a year in Rikers Island, they're in good shape. They actually are maybe they're pumped up and just really healthy, and they don't look like the person who was identified by the victim, and so I had to show the jury the before and after, so you're not fooled by the person who's sitting in the courtroom.
Exactly, and he's probably got no access to steroids while he's incarcerated.
Yeah, right.
If he does, we probably have another problem with jail security. But Doctor, I want to get into a second point here because some attention has been paid by the defense to the continuing relationship between Christy Mack and War Machine. Why would someone who is being threatened by a defendant then apparently make comments to her other boyfriend that she can't give 100% of herself to him, and potentially there's an insinuation that that's because she's really still either in love with or infatuated with War Machine? Why, throughout what the state characterizes as abuse, would she stay in that relationship?
Well, that's part of the confusing issues we have with any person in an abusive relationship. There's part of them that remembers the good times, and that's what they want back. And I see it every day in my own community with domestic violence. And part of that person really loves the good person that's inside, that they may only see 10% of the time or less.
That reminds me that, we were talking, Aaron and I, earlier, that the amended complaint, which added a whole bunch of charges, doesn't just include the date of this incident where both were beaten, August 8th, 2014. It goes back in time to May 1st, 2013. So it covers a range. And the additional counts are other dates, I guess, she's beat up. So what is it about women who get beat up a lot? I mean, generally it's men beating on women. I understand it can go the other way. Battered women. That they still stay with the person. What's the psychology there? Is it what you were just saying? They remember the good?
They remember the good. They love that. They don't want to inflict any pain on the person. And there's a part of them that's fearful. What if this person doesn't get prosecuted? What if this person doesn't go away and they walk back into my life tomorrow and I haven't, protected them, so to speak? They're afraid of the future violence. Plus, they have this other thing is, why should I go and start another relationship that's probably going to be just as abusive, maybe even worse? At least this person hasn't killed me. And unfortunately, I hear that, and then the next time the abuser gets harmed, it's because they have killed their significant other. So it got really close this time.
Doctor, how do you go about counseling people who live in that mentality?
It's extremely difficult because the victim is very confused. We want to try and get some cognitive therapy in there, trying to change perspectives a little bit and to educate them that that's not how relationships are supposed to be. But at the same time, overcoming that fear, it's almost like they created a whole new phobia for that individual. The perpetrator in this case has so much control over that person's life that they can't imagine a world without them there, and it's very difficult to overcome.
Have you watched some of Christy Mack's transformation as she's engaged with the court process in this case, and do you think that she's walking through a bit of that process on her own?
I think that's exactly what's going on. Again, there's part of her that's still, there's a reason why they were attracted to each other. She sees that part of that relationship, and there's part of her that wants to have that part back. I don't think it's ever going to be a safe situation for her, though, period, if he were to walk away from the court tomorrow.
A lot of attention has been read into this text message that was sent by Christy Mack to Corey Thomas, the second victim in this case. The quote, if I have it correctly from yesterday, was, "I can't give you 100% of myself yet." I mean, is it possible she was dating both of these people concurrently? Was she trying, or rather, should I say, was she trying to maybe bring Corey Thomas into her life and then push War Machine aside, but in a way that wouldn't result in him blowing up on her?
Of course, all that is possible. With that specific tweet, I don't remember exactly when that was posted, how recent or how distant in the past that was?
It was sometime before the cataclysmic fight that led to the instant charges, but it was introduced to try to speak to whether or not Corey Thomas should have known or would have known that there was another man in Christy Mack's life. And the defense's insinuation is that that was a signal that maybe Thomas should have been wary that there was someone else out there lurking, literally, and the prosecution was trying to characterize it to indicate that no, that was just Christy Mack engaging in some soul searching and trying to understand herself, and there was an objection in the testimony, but if I'm remembering it properly, Corey Thomas seemed to characterize it the way the prosecution did, saying, well, I'm dating someone who's an adult film star, and it's more likely than not that she's got a lot of wounds from being engaged in that, and of course she might not trust me. She's had difficult relationships in the past, and she's just engaging in a process of figuring out how close she wants to be with me. So that was the context that conversation sat in, and I suppose it could be interpreted both ways.
I think both responses are completely legitimate responses. From Corey's standpoint, he doesn't have the whole picture. He only has the little, the part that she's allowed him to see, at least at that point in the relationship. I was concerned if that was after the offense that we're dealing with right now or closer to our actual court date, then I think it would have held a whole different meaning altogether. But before the altercation, before that instance, I think Corey's perspective is completely reasonable. I would like to hear from Christy what her perspectives on it, but in the whole big picture, I don't know how it applies directly to the date in question and the assault that took place.
But talk about risky. I mean, he had a key. War Machine had a key to her apartment or her home, and she's got another man in her bed. But anyway, we're being notified that War Machine is back in session, but we're not ready to go live yet. Okay, we will be going back momentarily. But I mean, for her to engage in that, right? War Machine had a key to the apartment, and he says, I mean, I read somewhere, I didn't hear it, that they had exchanged texts, or she had texted him just an hour before the attack, "I love you," or they said it to each other, and then he claims he was coming over to like propose to her or something, and then he walks in and finds Corey in bed.
I don't know if I've heard that direct testimony yet. It's more likely than not that could have been going on, because there were mixed messages piled on top of mixed signals on top of miscommunication in this case. So trying to unravel all of that has been difficult from an evidentiary standpoint. And the way the trial is progressing has been relatively confusing, because after the exceptional opening statement by the state, we had a rather meandering opening statement by the defense attorneys, and their whole theory of the case was, well, it won't make sense to you right now, just wait until our closing and then it'll all make sense, which was bizarre.
No, you gotta
very,
slay it
very
from
bizarre.
The beginning. Yeah.
Exactly. So there was the jury is sitting there trying to figure out exactly what's happening and trying to tie it all together. We've seen the state lead many witnesses with questioning, asking closed questions of witnesses. We've seen the defense ask open-ended questions of witnesses and allowing witnesses to develop their own stories, which, in my opinion, is oftentimes not terribly helpful to the defense. So the wheels are not completely off the track, but they're close. So trying to figure out the narrative that's being told here has been a little bit tricky. The state made its case. The state has been asking the correct questions to get its case out there. The defense tactic, I'm almost suspecting they're just trying to cover their bases to have grounds for appeal.
That's what it sounds like from my experience. And the state of mind, whether he's texting her the night of that he loves her and stuff, the material I've read indicates that he may have been drinking that night. Then you add the antidepressants, you add the steroids on top of that, to try and assume that he's thinking like a normal person at that point is probably a reach.
So do we have any news coming out of the courtroom?
We're
Oh,
hearing
okay.
that they were getting set up, that we don't believe they're completely ready to go, or that we're not getting the feed. So we're standing by waiting for it. We saw a bit of something. In a lot of these cases, we know that we're not supposed to be transmitting out of the courtroom until the judge takes the bench.
Right.
So sometimes it's a wait and see, and then it immediately. We have to go to it very, very quickly. We're also hearing that there's not any sound coming out yet, so it would be an indication that, in this case, I believe the judge actually does have control of the courtroom sound. So if there's a sidebar or there's something that she doesn't want anyone outside to hear, she can hit the kill switch, and it cuts our ability to try to monitor what's happening where, several time zones away from where we sit in Midtown Manhattan.
Right. Also, if you're following the Aaron Hernandez trial, they did come back from lunch, immediately went to a sidebar, and now they're in a recess again. There was some talk coming out of court that they might have gone, the attorneys might have gone to an appellate judge to on a ruling the judge made regarding the current witness's testimony, one of the victims from the back seat of the BMW. And depending upon what the higher court said, they might actually table that witness for now and call another witness. But I don't have any other news coming out of the courtroom, and they're not in another brief recess right now. So you're not missing anything, but you can still watch it when it resumes, although you'll miss the lovely commentary from Aaron Keller after I leave. I'll be leaving in just a few minutes.
Yeah, we're really waiting to see where this goes. Yesterday's testimony was a bit mundane in the case. A lot of testimony from neighbors who were with Christy Mack or watching her frantically search for help, and it painted a heartbreaking scene, but it was also painting a confusing scene. It was befuddled. It was her running out of the house with blood on her face, covered in either a sheet or a blanket. The neighbors all corroborated very, very well to just describe a very confusing scene. She's knocking on doors, calling for help. Some people were afraid to open the door, not knowing who else might be on the other side. The neighbors did not know her. Neighbors were calling 911. Police were taking about 10 minutes to get back to the scene. They had already been in the area once because of the 911 call, and then they're on their way back. Neighbors are calling 911 back. There was a paramedic who just happened to be renting a house nearby on vacation, who ultimately did give her some degree of treatment. And the testimony yesterday was that she collapsed after thanking him for helping her. And just a heartbreaking scene. We talked about that yesterday. Heartbreaking, but also confusing. I mean, if a stranger's knocking on your door saying they need help, I mean, in the night, do you turn around and then offer to open up, not knowing if someone like War Machine is lurking out in the darkness? And that was the concern we heard in the testimony yesterday. Then we had some of the police detectives from the sex crimes unit and the sexual assault examiners coming on. We ended yesterday in the middle of the examiner's testimony where she was describing the specific witnesses that rather not the witnesses, the injuries, I mean, the injuries that she had. So, Dr. Huber, we appreciate you hanging on with us here, but we think we're going to try to continue talking about what happened in court yesterday. Your perspective has been very, very helpful in pointing out exactly where the line is that the state wants to make clear and which the defense wants to blur in the minds of the jury. So we appreciate having you with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So again, we're waiting for the testimony to resume here in the courtroom in Las Vegas with the sex assault examiner who was on the stand yesterday. They broke for the evening, and it looks like she might be getting ready to sit down sometime soon. But she was talking about the specific injuries that Christy Mack had and starting to show photos of those injuries to try to back up the degree of ferocity that this attack was encompassing. You know, we've heard the